Well, hello, free people of the Rocky Mountain region, and welcome to this Free State, Colorado interview. Today, I'm joined by Kim Monson, radio show host and president of the Colorado Union of Taxpayers. Kim has been a liberty leader in Colorado politics for many years, serving on the Lone Tree City Council and writing numerous articles in defense of liberty. Kim has been hosting the Kim Monson Show for the past 6 years, discussing freedom versus force and force versus freedom, and can be heard on KLZ 560 AM live Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. Well, Kim, I hope you are well, and thank you for joining me today.
Brandon, it's a pleasure to be with you, and I want to congratulate you on the great work that you're doing at Free State, Colorado. It is so important, and I thank you.
Well, thank you, Kim, for keeping the torch alive. I think what you do on AM radio and just your activism and your vocal support of our liberty is so important. And it's great to be able to talk to a liberty leader like you and learn a little bit about your history and where we can go forward in Colorado.
Well, it's exciting. It's been quite a journey. It started, I think, Brandon, when my kids were in grade school, and they were coming home not learning some of the things that I really thought they should, like our history. But yet they were learning a lot about the rainforest, which I agree we should be good stewards of our earth. But that was where things started, is I didn't feel they were getting the whole picture. And that progressed from there.
No, that makes a lot of sense. You just gave me a flashback of growing up in Jefferson County public schools, and yeah, Earth Day was a big deal, probably a bigger deal than
George
our American
Washington's birthday.
holidays. Right, George Washington's birthday, President's Day, these holidays that kind of celebrate our heritage and our history. Yeah, they took second fiddle, that's for sure, to some of these more new progressive types of holidays.
Mm-hmm. And it is important that we are good stewards of our earth. And I've always believed in that, but not at the expense of humans being able to thrive and prosper.
Definitely. That's a key point these days where this green agenda is being used by these social engineers to remake our society in their image. And it's really unfortunate. But I think people are waking up to this and kind of pushing back.
I think they are. And Brandon, I think you know that I was involved in my first film work with the documentary A Climate Conversation. And it's just a great documentary regarding kind of Socratic questioning that I think people are wanting answers to. And people can find that and watch it for free at aclimateconversation.com.
Definitely recommend it. I was there at the opening night there in Lakewood at the Rockley's Event Center. And yeah, it's a phenomenal film. People need to watch this and really understand how the science can be manipulated. I mean, it shouldn't be too surprising after the whole COVID era we had in
Yeah.
2020 that science can be, manipulated in a way to present a specific worldview that is not necessarily conducive to our liberty.
Well, and in this, what I've learned, Brandon, is the green in the Green New Deal is really about the green that's going in a lot of people's pockets.
That's a very, very true. So Kim, you talked about, when your kids coming home from school kind of got you politically active, got you aware. I mean, what was it really that made you want to get involved and start becoming an outspoken proponent of liberty?
Well, I never really thought I'd be outspoken about this, but I would say the inflection point was when my youngest was studying at the Colorado State University, political science. And Brandon, I have one semester of college, but I've always been an avid reader, always curious about things. And hence, I would say I'm somewhat self-educated. But it was important to me, since I didn't have a college degree, that my children did. So we worked really hard to pay for these college educations. And my youngest came home, I think in between his junior and senior year at CSU, and started to espouse the benefits of a one world government with 9 judges that would make all the decisions for us. Brandon, I lost a gasket, and I couldn't quite explain it to myself, but I was angry. I think my son thought I was angry at him. He couldn't understand what was going on, but I was angry that people were teaching this and that I was paying for it. And so as I'm, blowing a gasket on this, my son says, "But Mom, they'll be really smart judges." I'm like, I said, "Do you not think the founding fathers thought there was a great idea about the, separation of powers and all?" And so that was probably my inflection point.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, the universities, of course, have been the center point for so much of this shift in American culture away from our, of heritage and values of freedom and constitutionalism towards this more authoritarian type of system for sure. That's interesting, and I appreciate that you saw that as an opportunity to do something about it, not just to shake your head, but say, "Hey, I'm going to stand up and speak out." So what did you do to start your political career?
Well, and people ask what happened with that. I actually did an intervention and actually sent my son to a kind of a worldview summit ministries that goes through all the different worldviews. Does make the case for the Judeo-Christian worldview in the United States, our founding fathers. And it was so interesting, Brandon, a little bit of truth, just a little bit of truth shed so much light. And so he became inquisitive again. And so it was a real success story. With that, I kind of, you know how you get these nudges and things kind of happen? I've been involved with my community. I'd served as president of the Homeowners Association, which is one of the most thankless jobs anybody can have unless they're into a lot of power. Um, but because of that, a woman that had been on Lone Tree City Council was term limited. I knew her well, and they asked if I would consider running. And I went through the little interview process. It must have passed, and so I ran unopposed. And I thought, if I don't win this, then I don't have a very good political career. But it was a real experience. Initially, I thought many of the electeds, and I no longer refer to them as elected representatives. And of course, down at the state house, they're not even a third of them are not even elected; they're appointed. But I refer to them as, or excuse me, no longer as elected officials, but as elected representatives. And it's important for us to remind ourselves of this, and also those that are serving in public office. And Brandon, what I started to learn was well-meaning people, when they get into elected office, sometimes, many times, through National League of Cities, Colorado Municipal League, uh, people start to forget that they are representatives of the people, and they start to think they're representatives of the jurisdiction or municipality or county, and that their job is to drive revenue for those entities instead of representing the people. So it was a progression for me to kind of figure out what was happening, but it was really good experience because I understood how the sausage is made, and I learned who the players are.
I think that brings up a really good point that a lot of people maybe neglect to think about, that when somebody gets elected to city council or state legislature, they really are surrounded by these special interest groups, by these interested parties, people out there who have a full-time occupation getting involved in touching base and providing information and lobbying and asking and demanding these things out of these different elected officials instead of the regular citizens who
Representatives.
are these elected representatives, instead of individuals, just normal people living their lives, going to church, taking their kids to school, working their jobs, trying to maintain their households. People are just trying to get by and live their lives, but there's this whole professional political class out there, these lobbyists and these other groups that you mentioned, who are so much power just because they're there all
Mhm.
the time. They're writing all the papers, they're helping draft legislation, and I can see how these well-meaning individuals get elected and all of a sudden get caught up in these schemes and all these other interest groups. That's I think that's a really important point that probably isn't talked about enough in terms of local politics.
I think that's true, and to your point, people have been busy. They're busy trying to keep it together now with all the high inflation and just, working, taking care of their families. And for so long, I think we've trusted that the people that are in these offices have us, the citizen, our best interests in mind. But that's not the case with many of these people that are in these elected offices now. And I call them PBIs, politicians, bureaucrats, and interested parties.
That's a great acronym there for describing these people who are really crafting legislation and controlling so much of our lives without great public input.
Mhm. Well, and they make it difficult for public input as well. You see it at the local level. Actually, many times the electeds, there is a buffer between the citizen and the elected by staff. And I found that really interesting as well. And a lot of people that, as we say, get into these elected offices, they're well-meaning, but they're just surrounded by all of this that's going on. And then the left, and so, Brandon, we see so many well-meaning people are stepping forward to run for office, and I so appreciate that. But we need to somehow help them understand what's going on, because many times I don't think they understand. They're going into a meat grinder, and and I think that we need to figure out a way to help them and support them through that, so that they can stand for these great principles of individual liberty. And so I think we're at a great time. Colorado's at the tip of the spear. On the show, I say we were made for this moment, and I believe it, Brandon.
Oh, Kim, I love that line. We're made for this moment. Definitely. I think, in the time and place we're in presents so much opportunity as well as obviously challenges. It's easy for people to get discouraged and say, these authoritarian Democrats have taken over everything and there's no hope and there's so little one individual can do. But I know that you know as well that a small group of committed individuals that are focused on issues can have a massive impact on the local level, the level that really matters the most. So what kind of experience did you have in the city council seeing how citizens can have an impact in their local government?
I would say it's really my own experience, and a story that is pretty interesting. As you may know, if you listen to the show, Hooters Restaurants is one of the sponsors of the show. And I don't know if have you ever heard the story, what happened with that, Brandon?
No, I
Okay.
haven't.
Well, now I'm into several years onto city council now, and there was only one thing that I would really take back, and that was early on when I was on city council, and the mayor and the past mayor, current mayor, they are really focused, even though they had R's behind their names, they've been really focused on the agenda of the World Economic Forum, mass transit, high density, transit orientated developments. And it took me a while to kind of connect the dots. If people want to ride a train or a bus, that's great. They should have the freedom to do so. But to subsidize the fare by 80% from other people, that's not a real free choice. And people now do not want to ride the light rail because it's dirty and it's not safe. So this would have been back probably 2012 during the Obama administration. And the Obama administration was pushing mass transit. And we got pulled in. I guess we couldn't all be pulled in because of sunshine law. So I think the mayor called each of us and had said that he thought it was important that Lone Tree apply for a New Starts grant from the federal government for the Southeast Light Rail extension, and that would be so beneficial to our community. I'm new on it, and we didn't really vote on it. It was just okay. I think in my gut, I was uncomfortable with it, but I thought, well, maybe we won't get it. Well, we were awarded the New Starts grant, and there were maybe, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 cities that were. And it was, I think, like, I may not have my numbers exactly right, but these are close. It was $96 million. The estimated cost for, I think, 2.3 miles was over $212 million. And I started to look at it and I thought, this isn't fair that we would borrow money from our neighbors or our children to pay for something like this. It was not an appropriate use of federal money. And so I said that when it came to council, I would vote against it, which I did. And I had made the case and had talked to a constitutional attorney. And he had cited a couple of different veto. Well, one was a veto by a president. I don't know which one, but this was back when they were building the roads in the Cumberland Gap. He vetoed Congress funding that because he said that this was a regional issue and it was not a federal issue. Yet they did approve money for lighthouses up and down the eastern seaboard because they felt that that was important for commerce for everyone in the country. And so I cited that. Well, it was a 4-1 vote. And I thought, what's the problem? But they wanted consensus. They wanted unanimous votes. We weren't founded on unanimous votes. We were founded on people debating issues, and there was no real debate in the public. All this was happening either through special sessions or uh, study sessions. So I voted no. So at that particular point in time, we fast forward to 2015, I would look at these issues and look at them through this lens of freedom versus force. And force can be coercion, mandates, incentives, taking from one person to give to another. And so we fast forward to 2015 and we come up with the Hooters issue. And super interesting. You ready for that? Or okay. So there had been a TGI Fridays at the corner of County Line in Yosemite that had gone out of business. And Hooters restaurants wanted to come in and put a restaurant in. And I think that basically, they had started construction. It made sense. I think the city said this was probably fine because it was zoned for a restaurant. There'd been a liquor license there before. One of the things that we did at that time on city council was to approve liquor licenses. Now, from a libertarian standpoint, I have a real problem with all that, but that's one of the things that we did. And so this was pre-2016, when we didn't realize all this anger by many, I would say, progressive women. Well, what happened is many progressive women there. I had a friend that's Christian, but it was primarily far left leaning women wanted to stop the approval of the liquor license because they did not approve of the uniforms of the Hooters employees. And anyway, it ended up being a standing room only city council meeting on this. Walk in, and it was just wild. And so all the presentations are made, and I have never seen businessmen treated as badly as the franchisees for Hooters were from the dais. It was just unbelievable to me. And I made the motion to approve the liquor license, and there was no second. And I said, I would like to address what's going on here. And the mayor would not let me speak. And he said, after the second, well, there was no second. And so during council comments at the end, so nothing happened with that. I said, I'd like to address what's going on here because I could feel it freedom-wise. And I was not allowed to speak. So by that time, Brandon, I was mad. And so left the council meeting and issued a press release on the whole thing. And Facebook blew up. And people were having to ask this question: what's the proper role of government? Or can government stop a legitimate business from doing business? And so it was 2015, and my neighbor, a Christian neighbor, called. She goes, Kim, I can't believe that you're in favor of this. And I said, let's have coffee. And again, this is pre-COVID also, Brandon. I said, this is a question about liberty, about businesses being able to compete in the free market. And if people want to go to that business, they'll succeed. And if they don't, then they'll go out of business. But it's not government's role to decide this. She goes, I get it. And then one of my sons called me and he said, I never thought my mom would be standing up for Hooters. And I'm like, it surprised me as well. But it was the right thing to do because you could see how these electeds and these bureaucrats, you get to COVID, you can see how it got in there. So that I waited until I was off city council. I didn't want it to appear as any quid pro quo, but I thought it was an important liberty story. And so I approached them about being sponsors of the show. They've been great sponsors of both shows, the Kim Monson Show and America's Veteran Stories. And they have been creating tax revenue for the city of Lone Tree for all these years.
Well, that's a great story, Kim. That's absolutely interesting to see, in a place like, Lone Tree. I wouldn't necessarily expect to see so much public outcry against a Hooters restaurant from being put in place. But it's interesting to see that just the role of government and on that local level, what these elected representatives can do to either stand in the way of legitimate businesses, as you said, or get in the way, or stand in the way, or let it happen. Let the market decide. And it's a really important lesson, and I think that's really does illustrate exactly what happened during COVID as well, in terms of the government being able to abuse their authority to shut down businesses that they didn't deem worthy or didn't deem legitimate or essential, quote unquote.
Right.
So interesting story, but nice to see that there was some public outcry. So did they end up getting the liquor license, or they ended up?
So what happened was, during the 2 weeks between the next council meeting, the city attorney pulled council in and said, "You don't have a leg to stand on. There's Supreme Court rulings regarding sexually orientated businesses. It was not, but you do not have a leg to stand on." So 2 weeks later, standing room only again, unbelievable. And suffice it to say that they did receive their liquor license 2 years or 2 weeks later. So,
Oh, wow.
and then
Well,
the
great.
funny thing about it, then I got a call from uh, um, the head of the Colorado Restaurant Association, and she said that the franchisee wanted would like me to be the guest of honor and cut the ribbon at the opening of the new Hooters restaurant. So I have this picture, and I actually had used this as a real freedom story of me cutting the ribbon, the beautiful Hooters girls down the side, and I said, "This is what," and the owner and his two sons, I said, "This is what freedom looks like."
Wow, that's great. That's a great story. So you talked about Hooters becoming a sponsor of your radio show. So I saw that you've been doing radio since probably around 2013,
Yeah.
and then from the last 6 years, been hosting your own show solo. What
Actually, I'm
role,
starting my 6th year now, Brandon, solo.
starting your 6 year
Mhm,
on the solo Kim Monson show?
mhm.
So what role does AM radio play in the Liberty community?
It's a really important role. Um, and we actually are working to have all aspects, but AM radio is really an unfettered voice for for, I think, the conservative movement. And when we say conservative, because the word conservative in the political realm has been demonized. But if you really think about it, what it is, it's to conserve these principles, conserve and preserve these principles that our country was founded on, the sanctity of the individual. And so it's important that we have these voices. I've invested in heavily and I buy my airtime, so I'm totally independent. And I've invested so that we are poised here in 2024. Uh, Basically, within 24 hours, the shows go to Spotify and iTunes as well. But the radical activist left knows how important AM radio is. And that is why that they are trying to influence that in new models. I would think it might be 2026. I'm not quite sure, but in new car models, that there would not be the option for AM radio for people. And so I think that's indicative of how powerful it is.
Wow. Yeah, I'd heard something about that story, but to actually believe that there's these bureaucrats or these radicals out there who are trying to actually get radio taken out of cars because it could present a view maybe that threatens their control or threaten their power. I mean, it's just absolutely wild. And what an assault on the First Amendment as well.
But they're couching it, Brandon, as that AM radio signal actually messes with, some of the electronics or whatever. So that's how they're couching it.
Oh, interesting.
Not true, but that's how they're couching it.
That is very interesting. Wow. In terms of radio, what do you think? I mean, one of the most important parts, I'd say, I mean, the internet is kind of the next generation, right? It's the next evolution of this mass communication system. But I think one of the most beautiful parts of radio is that you can't really stop the signal unless you actively remove the radio
Right,
station or the radio that people are listening to.
right.
It's something that's just broadcast out there, pretty much uncensorable, except for, I suppose the FCC, of course. Have you ever heard of any major stories with the federal government or the FCC coming in and coming after some of these AM radio stations as a way to try and censor or control the message?
Of Not yet on specifically on that, but where we will have the challenges is with the FCC on net neutrality. And that was something, again, when I was on city council under the Obama administration, I looked at this and I'm like, something's not right. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. When President Trump was in office, then they basically did not move forward. They should have stopped it all. But now that Biden is in office, they're trying to bring that back. And that's very dangerous.
For those who don't know, can you talk a little bit about net neutrality and what kind of threat it would have to the, the liberty movement or the conservative movement?
So it's complicated, but basically it would allow control of the internet and what is on the internet by PBIs, politicians and bureaucrats and interested parties. And we saw through COVID that interested parties did not expand voices, that they shut them down. And so net neutrality would be very dangerous for what you're doing, for what I'm doing. And we want more ideas. When we get all the ideas out there and kick the tires on the ideas, the good ones rise to the top.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, this marketplace of ideas, this freedom of individuals to be able to express their opinions and share ideas, whether some of these are loony ideas or some of them are great ideas, just being able to get them out there and let people decide. Let people decide what's out there. Recently, I just started getting on Twitter within the last year, and it's actually absolutely been phenomenal. I completely understand why it was such a threat during the 2020 elections and before. Just the ability of an individual, and similar to AM radio and podcasting and the internet in general, just the ability of a small group of individuals or a single individual to be able to reach thousands of people. I mean, it's so powerful. And Kim, that's one of the things that gives me the most hope is that with the internet, with this new technology, there's this ability for individuals to reach more people than ever so that these good ideas can rise to the top, so the truth can get out there. And Kim, I just think that's so important and really makes me an optimist about the future of our country.
Brandon, you said the word truth, and a little bit of truth, a little bit of light by a few committed people, amazing things can happen. So when I said we're made for this moment, we are.
Well, speaking about being committed to truth and shedding light on things, earlier you mentioned how politicians these can get elected into office, whether it's city council or even higher office, and become captured by these interested parties and these bureaucratic machine, if you will. So that's why I think what the work that Colorado Union of Taxpayers or CUT is doing is so important. Kim, you're the president of the Colorado Union of Taxpayers. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What is the Colorado Union of Taxpayers?
Well, I agreed to be president at the beginning of 2023. It's a group, Brandon, of all volunteers that has been watching legislation in Colorado since 1976. They have saved Coloradans billions of dollars, but it is all volunteer. So, I mean, you look at these lobbyists that are down at the State House, and you see that electeds they rely on these lobbyists because last year, Brandon, there were 681 pieces of legislation that was introduced, multiple pages. This is totally irresponsible because there's no way that electeds can read and know what's going on. And if they can't read it, then we should not be passing it. So the Colorado Union of Taxpayers, first of all, I stand on the shoulders of giants. What this group has been doing since 1976 is amazing. Now, the board of directors has assured me, I took over the presidency at the beginning of 2023, that the 2023 legislative session was the worst one that we've ever experienced. Like, thank you very much. I think 2024 could be even more interesting. But the way this works is we review every piece of legislation regarding the Colorado Union of Taxpayers pledge. And people can go to the website, it's coloradotaxpayer.org, or put in Colorado Union of Taxpayers, and all of the information is there. And so what happens? We purchased this software called Bill Track 50, and it was created by a woman that lived in Denver. She lives in London now, and it actually tracks all of the legislation through all 50 states, all proposal, and also Congress, hence Bill Track 50. So the way we have it worked out is on Friday afternoon, all of the legislation that will be proposed or has a hearing date for the next week comes up on bills for us to review. I, as president, go through and I do miss some things. I mean, it was a lot. I mean, Brandon, when I would open that up on a Friday afternoon and there would be 86 pieces of legislation for me to go through, I mean, it's an enormous amount of time. And I was getting cranky about it. And then, as you know, I've done all this work with America's Veterans Stories, interviewed all these World War II veterans. And so when I start to get cranky, I'm thinking, you know what? They went up on Omaha Beach, June 6, 1944. I can probably go through 86 pieces of legislation, even though I was cranky. But then I would go through and try to take a look at it and determine if this was something that the Colorado Union of Taxpayers, it would be appropriate for us to, with our mission, to take a position on it. So then I would select those pieces of legislation, send it out to the board via, again, Bill Track 50. The board would have until Sunday night to review. So support, not support, or do not rate. And then from that, on Sunday night, I would take what the board recommended and create an email that goes out to our email list, our membership list, as well as all the legislators and the governor. And I've been told by legislators and even local elected representatives that it was very, very helpful to them. And so that's how it works. And so we rate this all session long. And as we're coming into 2024, I'd like to make a plug for people going to coloradotaxpayer.org and joining. It's only $25. And we would really appreciate, I'd love to get to 1,000 members this year. And you will be very informed as Brandon, what you're doing, I'm doing. People have so much coming at them. It creates chaos and confusion. And so you need trusted sources where you can very quickly look at what's going on and have an understanding of it. And then also be able to engage with people to like it. Did you know the legislature's doing this? And so would really recommend that people join us. And again, it's so reasonable. It's all volunteers. But they've done just great work. And then I'll just show you, this is our ratings report. I can't see it very well, but that is also on the website. This took hours for us to create, but it gives you a lot of great information about what happened last year.
Oh, definitely. I mean, the work that Cut is doing, I think, is so valuable at the legislative level. I was actually served, well, I didn't serve, but I was a legislative aide for one of our state representatives, Tim Leonard, back in 2017 down at the state capitol. And I was in a great office with some of our pro-liberty rabble rousers down there, Representative Steve Humphrey, Dave Williams, Kevin Van Winkle, and Tim Leonard. And every morning, my job was to get on the Cut website and Principles of Liberty at the time as well and check all the bills that were on the calendar for the day and, send out a text or print them out and hand it to each of our little cadre of Liberty leaders down there and make sure they knew what Cut had said about the bills. So I got to see it in action, and it was pretty exciting to know that there's an organization out there, kind of like a watchdog, keeping an eye on the bills that are going through because it's overwhelming. I mean, it's overwhelming for these legislators. They're just, for the most part, just regular people. They get elected and they're totally inundated and just completely overwhelmed with the amount of things that happen at the state capitol, whether it's trying to sort through the legislation and deal with committee assignments and all the bureaucracy that comes with it. So Cut's work is very valuable. And I really do think it's so exciting that all 100 legislators serving in the General Assembly get the ratings. I mean, there's no excuse for them to say, hey, I didn't know that this bill was going to increase the tax burden on the people of Colorado or make it harder for businesses to operate. It would hurt communities. There's no excuses because they're getting that email, they're getting that update every week from Cut. So pretty incredible stuff.
One other thing, Brandon, that I learned from a strategic standpoint is sometimes the radical activists that have taken over the Democrat Party. This Democrat Party is not the Democrat Party of JFK. And I really think that and what I'm seeing is the Republican operative consultant class and the radical activist Democrats have come together to work together. And while that's happened, Colorado is in deep significant challenges. But I really think that the moderate, blue dog Democrats and Republicans and libertarians and unaffiliateds and conservatives, that big, broad, messy middle of America that just wants to live the American dream with liberty. I think people are starting to pay attention. And what Cut is doing is we're trying to give them a tool to get above all that chaos and confusion. So what I did realize, though, is these radical activists that have taken over the Democrat Party, sometimes if they have a real bad one that they want to pass, they won't have that up for hearing on Friday afternoon, but they might introduce it during the week. And so when I finally figured that out, I'm like, this is very sneaky. This is not being transparent with people. And so I spoke with the creator of Bill Track 50, and I said, can you flag me if something is coming up during the week that wasn't on Friday? So we're working to thwart their sneakiness, if you will, Brandon.
Oh, I love it. That's great. Yeah, it seems these legislators get more creative every year in terms of, passing taxes off as fees or trying to introduce legislation extremely late in the session and not giving anybody the opportunity to testify or even know what's in the bill, as we saw this last year with everything that led to Proposition HH. And so it's great to know that Cut's out there. And I was thinking Colorado Union of Taxpayers, but it's also cutting through that confusion, cutting through that
Oh,
chaos, kind of
good.
providing that clarity.
I like that. I think we're going to use
to
that. Okay.
It's perfect. One of the things that I really like too with that, you held up that guide for the year, is the ranking of the legislators. I've worked on a couple campaigns in my time, and it was really nice to be able to send a postcard out to voters and say, hey, this person's a guardian, a taxpayer guardian. They're a champion of the taxpayers. And it really gives a better picture from a nonpartisan group that's focused on very specific issues to say, hey, here's how this legislator ranks. Here's how your current representative in the state legislature. Here's how they treat your tax money. Here's how they see you as a business owner, as somebody that's a part of the community. So those rankings of the legislators, I think, is so important because people don't know. People don't know what the legislators are doing down there. Most of them have no idea who's representing them at the state capitol. So for Cut to be able to provide some guidance in terms of, hey, is this person really standing up for me as a taxpayer? I think that's very valuable as well as tracking the legislation.
I think so as well. And Brandon, we've had some comments from Republican legislators that are in districts that might be more challenging from being elected, and on whether or not we should change our rating system to understand and reflect that they are in these difficult districts. And we really thought about it, and we understand that, and we empathize with it. But we really felt that our job as Cut is to provide this, honest assessment of what's going on, and so that's why we've not relaxed our standards for our awards on our taxpayer guardians and all.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. I could tell you from some firsthand experience, I dealt with some frustrated Republicans who were very unhappy with some of the scores they got over the years.
Yeah.
But
Uh,
you can't lie. You're not going to lie just because they're a Republican, right? I mean, that's what's so valuable about the work that Cut does. I mean, here it is. These are the facts. This is the reality of it. If you have an R by your name, you're not protected. You're not going to be treated any differently than any other legislator out there.
that's exactly right. And we appreciate this situation we're in, but absolutely, you're correct.
Well, Kim, you talked a little bit earlier about the pledge that candidates get in terms of, are they going to stand up for reducing government spending, reducing taxes, reining in regulations and having some accountability on spending? What kind of feedback have you gotten any recent feedback from any of our candidates running for office coming up in 2024 about the pledge?
We haven't aggressively been out there with the candidates on that. And I would say, Brandon, that it's just really a time thing. I've been drinking from a fire hose this last year. and starting to get my sea legs on this. So we've not really aggressively gone out to the new people that are running for office. I think we'll get back in that. Marty Nielsen and all those before me had done a great job on that. I just haven't had the bandwidth to do that yet. So, but we'll get to it.
Oh, perfect. No, I mean, the pledges are so interesting. I've heard from some candidates running for office next year, some people in some, maybe some pro-liberty Republicans in some very tight districts who are, concerned about sending any type of pledge, whether it's, cut or Rocky Mountain gun owners, or the Libertarian Party of Colorado now has a pledge to kind of protect good Republicans from a libertarian's potential spoiler. So it's really interesting. I'm interested to see this dynamic play out in 2024 in terms of how candidates respond to all these different groups coming out, and what that's going to mean going forward, Kim. So
Yeah,
we'll see.
that is going to be interesting. I'll get back with you.
Perfect. Well, Kim, what else are you looking forward to, or looking towards with the 2024 legislative session? Do you see anything here coming up on the horizon?
I'm hearing that there's going to be some very onerous, unconstitutional pieces of legislation. I'm hearing that uh, oh gosh, which one was it now? Was it Senate Bill 213? Was that the big land use one? That's
Yes,
coming back in pieces. And that's one of the things that once it's defeated, it doesn't mean that it goes away. It's just they come back and it will be more difficult to defeat in pieces. So we're going to have our work cut out for us.
definitely. And you brought that up earlier too about what is, for people who don't know, Senate Bill 213. It's Jared Polis's plan to basically force high density housing into suburban communities that don't want it, and create these transit corridors where you have mass transit with high density housing, basically creating, turning these suburban communities, whether it's Arvada and Golden or Lone Tree, into downtown Denver, and these communities don't want it. I mean, it's very interesting to see the outcry from the municipalities and the counties last year pushing back against the governor. I mean, you have Boulder and Vale and Aspen teaming up with, some more of the red cities and counties all coming together and saying, we don't need the state government to force this on our local communities. If we're going to have a representative government, it should be represented at the local level. So I think that's going to be a big key theme. I think you hit the nail on the head with that, Kim.
Brandon, one other thing that I think is important to realize, and I really thought a lot about this. As you mentioned, there was all of this pushback on the Senate Bill 213 because local jurisdictions said we want local control. But they're more than happy to take away the local control of the individual. That's one of the things that when we talk about local control, that doesn't mean that we as individuals give our power up to the jurisdiction that we live in. The most local of all control is us. And so you saw all these jurisdictions come together because they didn't want to lose their power over the communities. But I think it's important. I mean, if you drive around the metro area, you look at all these apartment buildings that look like Soviet style housing. And then you also realize because of public policy and the construction defects legislation that was passed many years ago, that these are all rental units instead of ownership units. And so it prevents people from starting to own something, property rights, and create equity. All public policy. And public policy is incentivizing these apartments and really trying to make it more difficult for ownership units and also for single family homes. But as much as jurisdictions came together to make sure that Senate Bill 213 didn't go through, bad boy before that was Prop 123, which, oh gosh, now was it 2 years ago? I can't, but I just take a gander at the money. And what happened was you had the Republican operative consultant class in bed with those that were pushing Prop 123. And I took a look on Tracer, and one of the former state GOP chairs took money to push that forward, which he has the freedom to do that. But yet then he can't say that he stands for property rights. And then another one of the Republican operatives that has several different companies was paid millions of dollars to push that forward. So now you have the state dangling this Prop 123 money to do exactly what Jared Polis had wanted to have happen. But so I know that actually I should be careful. I need to do a little bit more research, but I'll just say that many of these Republican conservative jurisdictions are more than happy to take the money, and I feel they're selling us out.
Kim, I'm really glad you mentioned that actually, because I hear it all the time, about how ineffective or weak or what a failure the Republican movement or the Republican Party or the Republican consultant class has been in Colorado. And I think a lot of it does come down to these, like you said, these consultants, these people who are making some money off the political system and trying to and supposedly guiding these Republican candidates towards liberty and freedom, but maybe not really actually doing that. So I'm really glad you mentioned that, because I think that's one of the big issues in terms of why the Republican Party in the past hasn't stood up for liberty, property rights, our individual freedoms as much as they we would like them to see, right? So I'm really glad you mentioned that.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that's going to be a continuing theme going forward as we see, the Republican Party in Colorado, of course, is facing a lot of challenges. And it'll be interesting to see if they're able to pull it out and focus more on that liberty effort and kind of push some of those authoritarian consultants out. We'll have to see.
Brandon, on that, again, my journey, what I've learned is this Republican operative consultant class is they have milked our donors. So we have donors that they care deeply about our state, and they are trusting these operative consultants, and they want to run their businesses. And these consultants come in and say, "Hey, give us this money, and we'll do something on this piece of legislation." Or whatever, and they do, and they may be successful on that, but they milk the donors, they put money in their pocket, and then they lose elections. Because if they started to actually win, then the problems start to go away. Another example is the homeless situation in the metro area. Remember when Hickenlooper said, "I'll when he was mayor, we'll get rid of homelessness or we'll address homelessness, and we won't have that after just a few years. Just throw some government money at it." Well, right now, at least $500 million is going towards the homeless, and there's more, but that's something I've been able to source towards the homeless issue in the metro area. When you've got PBIs making $500 million on a problem, do you think they're going to want to try to solve it? I don't think so.
Oh, and Kim, we saw a perfect example of that during the special session. I know you were down there. I was down there. One of our great Liberty leaders and friends, Natalie Metten, was down there fighting the good fight. And there was this bill for eviction assistance or, low income housing assistance. It's one of the first bills that was presented during that chaotic special session just this last November. And if you really, and I really read into the bill, which not everybody always does, and the $50 million or so, whatever it was, that was going to help these people, it was going to nonprofits. It was going to these agencies and these, I can only assume, politically connected organizations who are then going to solve the problem. So, not that I'm casting doubt or blame on any specific group, but it's a perfect example of how taxpayer money can be spent and given to these different organizations to solve a problem. And you're exactly right. What kind of incentive do they have to solve the problem if once they solve the problem, their funding, their money dries up,
Mhm.
right?
Absolutely. That's called cronyism. And that's with a number of non-governmental organizations that hide behind the fact that they want to say they're a charity.
Yeah, it's shocking, but it's so obvious. I think once people start digging in, which is why your show is so important, and the work of other liberty leaders in Colorado is so important, just to expose this information, get it out there, give the voters, the taxpayers, the full picture, so they can make a better, more informed decisions about who's going to be representing them in our governments.
Well, and to that point, we do have an issue regarding our elections. I call it legalized manipulation here in Colorado. Brandon, the idea that we are at taxpayer expense sending mail in ballots all over the state and not cleaning up our voter rolls. So we don't, I mean, all of these ballots going out there, not cleaning up our voter rolls and not having the opportunity to actually audit our elections. We must demand that we make some changes on that. And I think most reasonable people are like, what? We don't audit our elections? I'm like, nope, they won't let us.
Oh, Kim, it's a great point. And obviously, since 2020, that's been a major issue. And it'll be interesting to see, if there can be enough citizen pushback or whether it's a citizen-led ballot measure or something like that to create better transparency or better integrity around our elections or auditing like that. It's definitely going to be an uphill battle, that's for sure.
It is.
Well, Kim, we talked a little bit about different things people can do, whether it's using their voice to get out there on social media or on the radio to speak truth to power and talk about freedom and liberty, to maybe get involved in their local governments, and of course support the Colorado Union of Taxpayers with a very small amount of money, $25 a year to help support the great work you're doing. Kim, what would you say people can do to help create a free state, help restore liberty and sanity to Colorado? What are some things people can do?
First and foremost, I would recommend that people learn the issues. So, what you are doing at Free State Colorado, trusted source. What I'm doing, a trusted source. There's only a few real trusted sources out there. What I've learned is there can be political agendas that are being used to push narratives on the Republican side. So I would recommend that people be informed and then start. My dad always said, put your thinking cap on and start to take a look at freedom versus force, force versus freedom. And you realize that if the PBIs are willing to use force over here on an issue that you may not care about, they're going to be more than happy to use force on something you do care about. So it's in our best interest to come together to stand for freedom, the sanctity of the individual. And freedom or liberty is the responsible exercise of freedom. It doesn't mean you just get to go do whatever you want. There's a duty in being a citizen. And so be informed. Free State Colorado is great. The Kim Monson Show is great. And people may not agree with us on everything, and that's fine. We want to have people thinking about this. And then I would say pick one thing, that the thing that keeps you up at night, and then become involved in that. Or if there's something that you love, get involved in that, but do at least one thing. And if all of us do one thing, we will reclaim this state and our country.
Very well said, Kim. Well, Kim, I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to talk to me. And hopefully, some of this information is useful for other people who want to have a voice for liberty in Colorado and provide some guidance for creating this free state. So I appreciate you so much. And thank you for all your time and all your hard work.
Well, and I love that. Free State Colorado. Brandon, you're doing such great work. And thank you. It's been a real honor.
All right, Kim, take care.